Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Creating Opportunities. I am so excited to have my friend Haley Westfall on today. I met Haley at an event and then became a member of her community. So, we are going to talk today about being a member of a community, why she cares about community, why you should care about community. But first, Haley, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. I just feel like it's very on brand that we met at an event, first of all. Secondly, I'll give you the ultra short version of who I am. So, my name is Haley Westfall. I am a business mentor and community building expert. I stumbled into the entrepreneurial space a little unconventionally after spending 20 years in corporate leadership and really had to kind of get real with what are the things that I love the most and how I can create impact in the world now that I am on my own terms. So, at the core root of what I care about is people. This is why Cassandra and I have so much in common and really cultivating real relationships. So, as she stated, I am the co founder of Collab Culture, which is a membership based community for female founders here in Arizona. And then, aside from that, I also have my coaching and consulting business where I do a bunch of in person event activations and all kinds of fun things.
Yes, so fun. So, starting off, let's talk about collab culture. How did you all come to decide to make collab?
Yeah. Okay. So, quick backstory.
Yes.
Stephanie and I, we are the co founders of Collab. We have been friends literally for like 30 years, which sounds impossible. It makes me feel old really fast. But truly, we've been friends since we were in elementary school. And we actually both were not entrepreneurs at one time. So, I was in corporate. She was running her mortgage branch with her and her husband. And we both kind of came to this crossroads where we were like, what's next for us? So, we kind of had done life together up to that point. And so, we started going to events, started kind of putting ourselves in the mix, and we would kind of huddle afterwards and put together like what were the things that we loved, what were the things that we didn't love, kind of have this debrief, if you will. And whether it was driving really far, we didn't super like the format or the culture or whatever that might be. And over the course of about a year, I would say probably all of 2021, this kind of transpired. And then come about Thanksgiving time, we were feeling frustrated because we were like, man, I just wish something existed that had all of these best pieces and just like maybe left these things to the side. Couldn't find it. And we were like, well, I guess we're making it. So we had this little baby idea. We brought together, I think, a dinner of like maybe 12 women that we knew throughout the community that owned businesses. And we had this little dinner party and we basically told them, this is what we're craving. We can't find it. Mm-hmm. Do you want to hang out with us? And that was pretty much the extent of, is this a terrible idea or do you actually like it? And everybody unanimously was like, yes, absolutely, we're in. And we thought, okay, perfect. We're going to meet at this coffee shop. It's going to be great. And we're like, let's just put it on the internet and like see if anyone else wants to hang out with us. So we did. And within the first 3 days, we had like 45 people sign up. And it was very apparent, very clear that this was a gap that was existing, especially geographic for where we lived. Yeah. And we were like, well, I guess we're not meeting at the coffee shop anymore. We're going to have to go back to that drawing board. And so that's kind of how Collab was born. This was January of 2022. So we're about at the 2.5-year mark now. And our community has just truly grown organically since then.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I love that. I feel like that's something, like, to me, the takeaway for everyone, we'll kind of end up, I think, talking about this more, is if you're not seeing the thing you want, create it. And it doesn't mean you have to create a paid community the way you did, but like I created my lunchtime group that you're a part of that meets once a month because I went, I miss going to lunch with people and it being easy. And so I like that it's just, oh, I send an email and a group of us goes to lunch, I miss that from the corporate world. And so it's just, think about those things. I think a lot of people go, oh, I miss this thing, or oh, I wish I had this thing, and don't think they can make it. Yeah. And I think we need to remember, like, no, you can make it too. We're not special. We just took a step.
I think it's most people get debilitated by the details that don't matter. So we get so hyper fixated on whether we should charge for it, how much we should charge, what should the cadence be, what should the format, where are we going to meet, all of these things. And it actually takes away from the core value of like, how does it make people feel? right? Just like you
Right.
said, if your,
Right.
friend's lunch, it was like, I just want to connect with people as human beings. Yes, we happen to all be business owners, but what happened to just being able to go to lunch,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so you really were in tune with, this is what I want, this is how I want people to feel. And the rest of the stuff, it'll
Right.
come. You'll figure
Yeah.
it out, but really focusing on that first will make it honestly so much easier.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that about the details because like the joke for me with the lunch, because I've talked about it if people listening to this are on my newsletter, I've talked about this lunch before. It literally, the email that goes out to everyone just says Biz Friends Lunch. Is
Friends
this a
lunch.
catchy name? No, it's a terrible name. This is not, but it's not supposed to be branded. But
Yeah.
I know people who would have gotten held up there, who would have said, oh, I don't have some cute name for it. There's not some group that we're calling ourselves, so I'm not doing it. What do I care about a name? 20 years ago when I go to lunch with people, I didn't go, hey guys, let me make sure I have a cute name for it before I invite 5 people to lunch. It's like not everything has to be branded now. But I think you're right. Like people get held up on those details. I had a friend, this is years ago, a church I was at, one of my friends had this idea to put together these women's breakfasts once a month. And somebody started chirping in her ear. She'd like started setting up the first one, got in her ear about, do you have this thing? Now is this thing set up? Now do they have a sign for here? Do you have paper plates that match that? And she was so stressed out the night before. And I looked at my friend, her name's Ashley. I went, Ashley, do we have a room that we're going to meet in? Yeah. Do you have a microphone? Yeah. And you have your speaker? Yeah. People know where to come? Yep. We're done.
Yeah.
If you got napkins, great. If there are donuts, fantastic. But like the key things are there. And so I think that's a really good point. And that's true. I hadn't thought about that before, that a lot of people get held up in the details. Simplify, simplify, simplify.
Well, and I think a lot of times too, it's just poor communication on the host's behalf, where quite frankly, you don't need to over deliver, but you do need to communicate clearly. So I talk about this a lot. I did a podcast episode on it, and I talk about the correlation between expectations and experience. So going into an event, I'm not expecting fancy plates. I'm not expecting all these things. If they're there, cool. Am I going to go home and talk about them? Probably not. But I am going to talk about the people that I met or the experience that I had. And so just making sure that's clearly articulated and people understand going into it. What is this for? How does it help me, or how do I contribute, and what should I expect? Is there going to be food? Is there going to be enough food? Should I eat before I go? Right? I'm like, this is the passionate set. Like, all these things are important. Right?
They really are. Yeah.
Like, what the heck? I haven't eaten all day and now I'm starving. Or everybody doesn't know there's going to be food. They all eat, and then you have a ton of food left that you have nothing to do with.
Right. Haley and I have a classic story that I've just been there when she showed it to other people. It is one of those things that you can't believe it until you see it, that a friend went to an event run by a group in town that they said there'd be food, and it was literally up a flight of stairs, and it was like one bag of chips. It was one bag of chips.
Tortilla chips and like cheese queso still in the jar.
Yeah, like in a like the Tostitos jar.
Yeah.
Y'all, not like a dip stick up you go it. No.
And so, again, whatever. Listen, I love a Sunday fun day. I love a little chips and dip moment, but also at the end of the day, we can't say food and bev included, and that's the experience.
Right, to a group of 200 or whatever. Right. Yeah, like no.
Right. So I think, again, the moral of the story, it doesn't have to be food, but just make sure the expectations and the experience, if you over deliver, great.
Yeah.
And, I could go on a tangent forever about just really soliciting that feedback. And that is one of the questions that we ask people who drop in at our meetings. We send a follow-up email thanking them for coming. And one of the questions in there is, how did your experience align with your expectations? What was your initial perception coming into the meeting? And how did your experience vary or align with that? And here is the really golden nugget here, is that yes, you want to know if you missed the mark, right? You want to know if maybe they were expecting one thing and they were disappointed. That is valuable information. However, what has actually been more fruitful is people giving us the feedback, I had no idea how incredible it actually would be, because that comes back to show us, man, we're not doing a really good job of showcasing the immense value that comes from this opportunity.
Yeah.
We could do better and really beef that up. So it is like both sides of the coin, but really going back to that experience and expectations and making sure you're constantly checking in it.
Yeah. I think too with that, no, you're right. It's a lot of us look at feedback and only think about the negative part of like, okay, that's what I can go fix. And we forget that sometimes the thing we think is really important isn't the thing others think is important.
Yeah.
And you learn from what they say they loved, like, oh, we got to amplify that. So that's true. It's like that part matters just as much. I want to take a slight step back because you are community driven. Community is at the heart of what you do. We're going to like go a little bit bigger. Why do you think community is important? It might feel like a no-brainer, but
okay, I'm going to take like a little bit of an unconventional approach. So no matter what it is that you believe, we were literally designed to live in community. We were designed to exist in community from the earliest of ages until now. That is physically how human beings were designed. We were never designed to be isolated or, on this one-man island, whatever, however you want to kind of articulate that. It is physically how we were designed. And I think about every single aspect of my life, whether it's in my marriage, whether it is in the season of motherhood, whether it's being an entrepreneur, whether, whatever those seasons are, or different kind of buckets, if you will, of my life, community is so insanely valuable. Right. I find people who, I'm able to confide in, I'm able to look for support, I'm able to be challenged and have people who we have that mutual respect and trust where I can let them challenge me. I was just talking about this today, and it's coming from a good place. And, there are little segments. You're not going to have the one size fits all where you're like, this is my community and they serve every purpose in my life. You're going to have, that's number one, not a fair expectation to place on anyone. But you're not going to go to your like non-believer friend to ask for advice about your faith. Right. You're not going to go to your friend who maybe doesn't have children to ask for parenting. It's like, this is logic. I'm not going to go to my friend who doesn't own a business to ask for advice about owning a business. And so I think for me, I have really seen from the core of even being in team sports as a kid, right? Playing competitive sports and growing up and having siblings and all of these things, like we were literally designed to exist in community. And I just believe that there is so much great power and impact that comes from being able and willing to link arms with other people. So we talk about this a lot, and you and I both kind of share this common thread where this is a life thing. I just saw you talking about it this morning in stories. Like, this is a life skill. This isn't like, oh, it only applies to my business. Cultivating real relationships and existing in community is truly a life skill that will transcend across every single aspect of your life and business. So long story long, because it's the best and we were literally built for it.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think I don't want to say sadly, but I am going to say sadly. I'm not trying to shame anybody, but I do think it's like sad that people have to remind themselves of that now. But I think it goes to Justin Whitman early wrote a book called Made for People where he talks about this in his intro. Y'all, the book is worth it just for the intro chapter where he talks about we now live in a world that the current of the river we're on is isolation. The current is loneliness, and you have to fight for community. So as much as we were built for community and organically used to have it, we do now have to make effort on what used to be natural. But because we are built for it, I think it's worth that fight. I think we have to swim against that current.
And I think it's just like we're in such an age of distraction. Yeah. So think about like our phones or my Apple Watch or all of these other things, all the noise, all the digital consumption. There is so much distraction that it really takes effort to cultivate real relationships. And it's not always going to be bi-directional. I'm just going to tell you, you're going to come against scenarios where you're going to be putting in the work and you're going to feel like it's not being reciprocated. And number one, that's a great opportunity for a conversation, but also it's a little trigger for maybe some self-awareness to kind of realize that, maybe this isn't in alignment with the relationships that you're wanting to cultivate. And that's okay. We can bless and release. It's not any knock on that person. It just may be that you guys are not kind of jiving, or that's not really necessarily what they're looking for.
Yeah. No, I like that you brought that up because I think that is one thing that gets kind of misunderstood when we talk about, oh, you need relationships, you need people. For some reason, some people hear that as like, oh, you need all people, or you have to, like, if you go to an event, you have to become friends with everyone in the community. Neither of us
Mhm.
are saying that. Like,
Nope.
there are people that I enjoy when I see them at an event, and there are
Right.
people that I enjoy that I met in an event, and now we have coffee, and now we call each other, and neither is bad. You are allowed to have different relationships with different people, but it's making that, the way I like to put it is, I like that bless and release, by the way, but I put it as effort, not force. I think when I first moved here, I was making an effort to meet new people, and at a certain point it felt like I was forcing friendships, and then those would end and it would be painful, and I'd kind of wake up, it would kind of be like a breakup where you go, well, I didn't really like that person that much in the first place. But I just wanted community, that it was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm gonna make myself do this, and now I just go, I'm gonna make an effort, but I'm not gonna force anything. If it's not reciprocated at a certain point, if there aren't signs of it coming back, or if I realize like, yeah, we don't really gel, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. You know?
And quite frankly, what a gift, because it's better to know that now and open
Yeah.
up this for somebody else who may be better aligned. And
Right.
you'll find, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have some like relationship trauma of some type. Whether that's you have been the one who has been just giving and not feeling like you're receiving, you've been met with that where, you know, you're really trying to make an effort and somebody's just kind of looking at you like, yeah, no, I'm not interested, or
Right.
whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people that are so against networking, or they have a
Yeah.
bad taste in their mouth because they're like, well, I tried, and, you know, I'm thoughtful and really make sure I'm intentional with my communication and really trying to be open. And, you know, I was just having a conversation actually earlier this week, and it's like when you send a thoughtful DM, and, you know, whether you're on LinkedIn or you're on Instagram or whatever,
Right.
Facebook, and you send it and somebody just double taps it and like doesn't respond, and you're like, I actually spent like several minutes
Right.
really making a thoughtful response, or sending a voice message, which you know is my favorite, like
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. And when you feel like that's not reciprocated, it can be deflating, but I just want to offer you the hope that it isn't like that everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just that you haven't found the right people yet.
Right. No, I totally agree with you. I think we talked to the same person. I made a post about that yesterday about rejection, and rejection sucks. And like,
Yeah.
for some reason, the professional networking space, it doesn't hit me quite as hard. I think a lot of it just goes to people are busy and not thinking about you. But it is, I agree with you of, it's, you have, this is, I used to tell my guy friends this about dating. You have to get through the no to get to the yes. And so it's like, okay, so that person double tapped you and that hurt, but now you're not going to focus on that anymore, on them, and you can move on to the person who is going to become your client, or who is going to book you to speak, or who does want to be the podcast guest, you know, whatever it is. And so there is something of, like you said, a bless and release of like, that was, we move on that. That was great. So, okay, going with that though, what makes, so not everyone is going to want to start a community, even though I think everyone should take initiative to have relationships. What makes a good community member? A lot of people are part of communities. What makes a good member?
So I think this really depends on so many factors, because there's in person, there's online, there's small, big, business, not business. But I would say the overarching theme is intentionality and consistency. So use our model, for example, with Collab. So our model is a membership-based model. I have plenty of friends, so many friends in the community building space, that do a drop-in model or do a kind of a la carte situation. For me personally, I have hard boundaries around that, because just as you said, I want roots that run deep, not wide. I want people committing to showing up and, you know, creating fruitful relationships with people. And that doesn't happen twice a year. It doesn't. I don't care what anybody says. Now, arguably, right, there is a little bit of a sweet spot where it's like, how much is too much in a membership-based model, where people are like, yeah, this is just too much. Like, I don't have time, or maybe the expectations in certain types of communities are very rigid versus other ones are not quite as rigid. And so I think whether it's that type of format, right, or on the flip side, another example I'll offer you, I mean, that's large, right? Our community is big, 125, 130 people, big entity, meeting every every single week, versus on the flip side of that, I created with 3 other girlfriends this little micro community called the Quad Pod. We met literally through social media, really found common threads. We all ran communities for female founders. We all had coaching or consulting businesses. We liked each other's vibe. And we were like, hey, let's connect. Let's do coffee, because we all live in different cities. Let's do coffee on Zoom. So we started doing that, and we made it a commitment. We made it a priority. We are all going to show up. We created a little Voxer chat. We chatted consistently through there, but we were very intentional about creating and holding space for each individual, right? So it's not the person sucking life out of the group the entire time, and really being able to provide support, friendship, the willingness to challenge one another. And we've now done that for the greater part of, like over a year and a half, probably going on 2 years. And this little micro baby group of 4 people arguably has created more impact in my business in the last year for sure than any other space. But very specifically because of the common threads we have and the intentionality we set around that community of really understanding what it's for and what it's not for, showing up for each other consistently and being really intentional about the time that we have together. Even when we've now done 2 little, I'm going to call them like mastermind retreats. Even when we do those, like we have fun, we go to dinner, we go to workout classes, like we do those things, but we also carve out time to literally put like one person in the hot seat. And we're like, hey, for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, you're going to be in the hot seat, and we're going to work through whatever you need. Right? Yeah. Whatever you need, we are here to support you, and we hold that space and time for each other. And it has been so fruitful. I can't even describe it to you. So I would say if you're in a community, whether it is like a membership or a free space, whatever that might look like, really making sure you understand why you're even there. That's huge. What the purpose is, right? Is the space that you're in full of people that are peers, prospective clients, maybe more of like mentors? What does this space look like? Is it a good use of time and energy? And can you commit to consistently being there? If you can answer yes to those things and have a lot of clarity, it will be far more beneficial for you than if you don't.
Yeah. I think knowing why you're going is such a huge piece. I've had that conversation with a lot of friends over the last year of like, but why'd you sign up for that event? Or why are you a member of that group? And sometimes people just get in joining mode and they forget.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, a lot of times, and I'll give you the link to a freebie that I have. It's called 3 Steps to Networking with Purpose. But one of the things in there talks about this exercise of really pre-screening why you're there. And so many people I talk to simply go to things out of FOMO, literally. They're like, it just looks really cool, and I just feel like I should be there. And you're like, well, what is it for? What are they doing? Do you need that right now? What is it? What is the purpose? What is going to be your quote homework that you're going to give yourself to make sure that you're following up and getting an ROI on your time? And most people don't have a good process for that.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many directions I could go with that. Okay. So one thing with that is I know we both are people who try and keep in touch, who follow up with people. I have heard others speak of like, Haley has everyone's number. She keeps in touch with this many people a day. Would you be open to giving a peek behind the curtain? I am curious, like, what is your follow-up process?
I will give you a mini peek behind the curtain.
Okay, that's fine. You don't have to give me all the secrets, but just,
But I may have a way for you to get a full peek soon. So stay tuned. But a mini peek behind the curtain. So number 1, it is my literal superpower. Connecting people is my literal superpower. But I will tell you that's a double-edged sword, because what oftentimes happens is a lot of people will ask me to connect them with people, and there is never a reciprocation. So I will tell you, when we go back to like that group I was talking about earlier, the group of 4, one of the big things that they've challenged me on, which I have really had to get a lot of clarity around, is boundaries, and not being a, servant to a fault, not being a helper to a fault, because that can come very organically and naturally to me. And, I'm just helping everybody, but I'm not necessarily feeling that reciprocated return. So number 1, it is my superpower. Number 2, the freebie is the baseline. baseline. So that is really where I start. So if you go into the freebie, it's 3 steps. It talks about understanding why you're there and who's in the room and how you're going to hold yourself accountable to whatever the homework is that you're giving yourself in that space. This is going to look different every time, right? If I'm going into a room that is primarily male, I may have a different kind of strategy than if I'm going into an all-female event, or if it's a room I've been in plenty of times, or maybe a room I've never been in before. For me, because I do go to so many things, there's a lot of rooms where I know a majority of the people there. So for me in 2024, a big challenge was getting into more rooms I had never been in before to challenge me to get outside of my box more. So I go through all of that in the freebie. We go about boundaries and getting really clear on, does this make sense, or am I simply saying no out of FOMO, which we already talked about, and then having the tracking mechanism to create the conversation beyond the room. So as far as what the process looks like for me, I kind of set the stage in that 3-step process when I'm committing to an event. So let's just run through an example. I have a conference I'm going to on Saturday, right? It's a large conference, 700, 800 people, all women. I do know a lot of people that are going, but there's also a lot of people that I don't. So this event specifically does not have really much time at all carved out for intentional connection on the main day. So for me, I created some events outside of that space to provide an opportunity for intentional connection, but it's also not lost on me that I need to be purposeful with my time while I'm there. So I sat down and looked at the event and said to myself, what is homework for myself for this day? It's like a 9-hour event that stretches me. Don't make it so easy that you're like, check, 20 minutes in and then I'm done. But don't make it so big that it feels unattainable either. So I sat down and said, what is my homework going to be for this event? What is going to feel like a fruitful ROI of my time, energy, etc. And got clear of kind of like who's in the room. And I don't mean you have to do like full research on everyone and their mother, but just getting a gauge of the dynamics of who's in the room. Boundaries are already understood for me because I've been to this event before. And then what is my follow-up process is going to be. So one of the tactical tools that I do when I go to these larger events is I create an album in my phone specifically for the event. So, I'll call it the name of the event. And then when I'm connecting with people, whether it's through email, whether it's through social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever, I will pull them up, or if I put their number in my phone and I screenshot it and I throw it in that album. So name of the event, I put them in the album. Somebody told me this week I was teaching in another person's mastermind, and she's like, I actually take a selfie with them. And put it in there, and same kind of concept. And that's really helpful. So I put all of those in an album. And then if there's something specific, and this is part 3 of that framework, that I'm going to follow up on where I can be of service and a resource to them, I add it as a comment on the photo. So say it was you, and say you were like, oh, I'm really looking for a new bookkeeper. I don't know, I'm just making something up. I would say, because I want to create the conversation that goes beyond the room, I have an incredible one. Once we leave here, I'll send you her info tomorrow, right? I'm not going to give it then, because then there's no reason for the follow-up.
Leave them wanting more, people. Leave them wanting more.
So I will say like, hey, totally hear you. I'm going to make myself a note, and I'm going to send that to you. And I will add it as a comment on the photo, and I will keep it in that album. Then this is the key. And I know you would agree, do the things you say you're going to do.
This is the hill I will die on. This is it. This is all you have to do.
If you're not going to do it. And I will tell you, most people fail here. Most people fail. They have good intentions. They go to the things, they say whatever, but they don't have a good system for tracking. So if I say I'm going to send you a bookkeeper, I will send you the bookkeeper. And then I have a separate whole project management system where I track a lot of this stuff. And that's where more of that robust framework comes in. But I will make that initial contact, and then I will queue them up in this kind of framework system for what those next step follow-ups are going to be. And I know you may be listening and you're like, this sounds horrible and very overwhelming. You don't have to go to the lengths. Like I said, the volume of events I go to, I have no other choice but to have a system like this, or I would never do it because it's too much. If you are like, I go to 2 events a year, or whatever the case may be, do it on Post-its, have a notebook, do the album thing. Like there's so many ways that you can do it that don't have have to feel overwhelming. But I really try to make that next contact, depending on like if I'm traveling or whatever, maybe it's 2 days later, but I really try to do it the next day. And then again, kind of create a reason to continue the conversation. So maybe it's like, hey, Cassandra, here's that bookkeeper's information. I really hope that it's a good fit for you. It was so good meeting you at the event. I'd love to know what your favorite part was. This does not have to be earth shattering, guys. Just be a human being and create a conversation, because that is going to be far easier down the road to then have a trusted business relationship with someone if you got to know them as a human being first. So that, I would say, is what I usually teach people, is kind of the phone album thing to start with, where like mostly if you're going to stuff in person, where have a place where you can dump all of this stuff, that you have visuals. I like the screenshots because I want a picture of what they look like. Right. A very photographic memory. If I just put somebody's name, it's going to be a lot more challenging for me to remember. So I like the photos. And then, like I said, once I make that initial contact, then I kind of move them into this other system and really, kind of go through from there to make intentional connection. But even like you and I were just talking about on my podcast the other day, if I see something or I hear something that reminds me of a conversation that I had with somebody. Maybe we were at an event and they said they got this outfit from this store. And then I go on and I buy something from that store because they had mentioned it. I'm going to reach out to them and just say, hey, remember when I was so obsessed with your outfit at this store? Thanks so much for telling me about this boutique. Look what I just bought. Right. It's not weird. It is not weird. No. I promise you. No. Just be a normal human being. So it's obviously a little more in depth, but I would say just having a system that you will do consistently. And if that is, if you're a pen and paper girly, keep it in your purse at all times. Right? If you're a more tech person, I use a project management tool. I do the phone thing first and then figure out how I'm going to follow up with them. And then I track it in a project management tool. It just really depends on what you're going to do. But just to go back to that intentionality and consistency, that is where you're going to get the best bang for your buck.
Yeah. I would say with that, first off, I love the phone album thing. I think if people are like, oh my gosh, this sounds like a lot of steps and stuff, it's really not when you sit down and do it. The one piece I would add that I always tell people is block your calendar for after the event before you go to the event. Block that time on your calendar, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, etc., where you're going to follow. And I have learned, depending on the event, like you said, I used to be a next day, like 10 a.m. the next day, sitting down doing it. Some people are traveling. Some people aren't going to be home the next day. Then they don't check their email for 3 days and they don't see it. That now sometimes I wait a couple of days, which is like hard for me because I want it off my plate. But if I want the effect of actually getting through to them, I wait. But I think that's just one piece I would add to this is like block the time to do that follow-up, because like Haley said, that is most people don't. I was thinking about it yesterday in that conversation around rejection and stuff. Like, do you know how much I reach out to people and nobody gets back to me? Or like I send the intro, like when you said the thing about sending introductions, I don't get a ton of introductions coming back my way, So it is stuff that after a while you have to figure out what are your boundaries on. But it very much is like the way I see it is I'm going to be the leader in this space of, okay, I will set the example on how this goes. And I think you're one of the rare ones I've seen who does the same. I totally understand not wanting to go into exactly what you do in that follow-up, but how much time a day do you spend on peopling, as I like to call it?
Gosh, a fair amount, honestly. It kind of depends on what it's for. So
let's
say as a facilitator, let's separate
let's take that out, and let's take out like having one-on-one conversations and stuff. I'm saying that time where you're going in, do you have a time each day where you're going into your system and going, I work this system right now?
Yeah, I don't do it every day. So I usually do it 3 days a week. And I would say I probably spend, depending on the day and what's in there, if I've gone to something large and it's kind of pushed a lot in there, or if stuff is like, more robust, I would say I probably don't spend more than maybe 30 to 45 minutes a couple days a week. And that's probably on the long end. Like sometimes I can be a lot more efficient with it, where it's just a reply back or it's a connecting somebody everybody. And especially once you get in the groove of it, these are not novels that you're writing, right? This is a very quick intentionality of like delivering whatever it was or asking a thoughtful question or whatever that might look like. So I would say 2 days a week, it's probably closer to like the 45-minute mark, and maybe one day a week, it's like less than 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I think that's helpful because I think sometimes people hear someone like you speak and think, oh my gosh, she's just talking to people all the time and all the long day. It doesn't take that long. And honestly, with our phones, like standing in line at the grocery store, I can send 3 messages on Instagram to people I've connected with at events. And that counts, y'all. Like, I think that's the other thing is people think that doesn't count because, oh, I'm friendly with them and, oh, I don't need something from them. Right. You shouldn't. Like, that counts. Just messaging and going, hey, I liked that post today. That was networking.
Yeah, a lot of it, honestly, I do in those funky pockets. So like I do it in the school pickup line. I do it while I'm waiting to pick up my groceries. I do it while my kid is at volleyball practice and I'm waiting to pick her up. It's very seldom that I am like sitting at a desk at my computer doing it for that entire period of time. Even at the gym, like if I'm on the treadmill and I'm just like walking, I'll pop some voice messages in there. And I think sometimes people get in their head where they're like, well, I don't want them to know and like hear stuff in the background. It's like, no, that actually just makes you a normal human, right? Like a normal human being. And it's actually far less intimidating and it's more personalized to just say, hey, I was thinking of you, I'm just at the gym, hope it's not too loud in the background. Like you can even call it out, but then say whatever it is that you're going to say and then I can move them over. But yeah, it is not that much maybe in volume, but once you create those systems for efficiency, it really doesn't take that much time.
Nice. I look forward to seeing what you end up doing with that. I'm interested because I mean I'm just interested in people's systems, right? Like I have my system. I know what I do. In the membership I'm creating, right, that I'm in the middle of right now, I'm literally creating a lesson on like, you don't need to over systematize. Like, don't overthink this. But I love seeing people's systems. So I'm just interested in seeing what you come up with. Okay. So I guess wrapping up, first off, well, I know this is somewhat time bound, but there will be a second and a third, I'm sure. So will you tell people about the table experience? You just announced it.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second, and then we'll end on a tip.
Yeah. So for context, I do have a podcast called The Table Podcast and really have stepped into this like brand, the table as really a signature cornerstone for this brand. It's so symbolic for so many ways, which is a massive conversation for another day. However, I do a pop-up series called The Table Series, which is a monthly event series that I host here locally in Arizona. And as we go to so many of these large events, our brains start working. We're over here like a mad scientist in a lab putting these things together. And I've really been ideating for the past year on this live event that is just distinctly different. It's literally doing what we did with Collab culture, but in a co-ed large scale live event. And so that is where the Table Experience Live was born. It is a 2-day event, February 21st and 22nd, 2025, held here in Arizona. It is about 250 person co-ed 2-day event. And it's really designed not only to motivate you and obviously teach you incredible things, but it's really designed to create a personalized experience that makes you feel like a human being. Because I think a lot of these times we go to these things and we're a number on a roster, in the sea of a crowd. There's not a lot of time for us to connect with people and really feel seen. And you are making an investment. A lot of times these things are not cheap. And I just want it to feel really fruitful for people. So we're doing some really cool, unconventional kind of approaches. We have a robust online community that is included in your ticket where you are able to start connecting with attendees, speakers, facilitators, vendors, sponsors, everybody 6 months prior to the event, where you're able to start cultivating real relationships. And we're doing some cool things in there with making challenges and gamifying it so people are rewarded for participating and being consistent and intentional. And that's included, and just some choose your own adventure type things where you're able to actually pick the things you want to learn on that you need in your business right now, rather than trying to fit a square peg in a round hole and making generic content applicable for your business. So I'm super excited. More to come on that. But yes, February 2025 is when it's happening. And I'm pumped. It's new and quite frankly, kind of scary to do things that are new, but I believe in it heartedly and I know it's going to be incredible.
Good. Yeah, I know it'll be great. And I'm looking forward to it. And I like that it's co-ed because here in the Valley, we have a lot of gender specific things, and the opposite sex isn't the enemy. So I like things
Yeah.
that have us together. And they are
So much
listeners of this
value.
podcast. So yeah.
Right. I'm like, we have value to offer each other.
Yes, of course. So
Yeah.
I always like to ask, or at the end, like, do you have, you've given tips. We've taught, I think there's a lot of things people can take away from this. Even just the photo album thing on its own, I think is great. What is one tip around relationship building that you think everyone could start doing today?
I think being a better listener. So I think a lot of times we think, I don't know if this is women or people in general as business owners, but we think we have to over explain ourselves and over qualify ourselves, and we tend to word vomit on people. But actually, if we were just better listeners, it would offer us to serve in a more intentional way, right? Because people are going to serve it up on a silver platter. They're going to literally tell you what it is that you need. And, actually be an active listener, asking thought-provoking questions, really engaging, showing genuine interest. Do not be looking at your phone while you're asking somebody about things. It's extremely rude, and it just shows them that you're not engaged. So I would say when it comes to cultivating real relationships and really showing that intentionality and that you want to be there, being a better listener and really allowing the other person to feel seen and heard, in my opinion, is one of the things that, again, people usually don't experience very much, and it will help you stand out amongst the crowd.
Nice. I love it. And for all my introverts out there, you should just be like screaming inside that was the advice. Cool. Well, Haley, thank you so much for being here. I'll see you at the table tomorrow at the next local one. And thank you all for joining.